Decades ago, I was a restaurant manager. After years of working for TGI McKillopy's, I was recruited by a regular to come work at a hotel. I was tired of the big corporate game, and this seemed like a new challenge. Plus, I was tired of trying to take pride in slinging food that, when done perfectly, was still mediocre at best. Right away, it was evident this hotel was a crap show. It turned out the property was under federal receivership as the owner was under indictment for making $500 million in loans to banks that didn't exist for companies that didn't exist. One day, the bellman who drove the shuttle came back from a run, super excited to tell everyone that the owner was back in the country, and he knew it because the bellman saw the owner led out of the airport in handcuffs by guys with windbreakers that read FBI. I was brought in to update the bars and restaurants, but was not allowed to change anything. The head of housekeeping denied my request to dim the lights in the bar because it looked cleaner. I later found out this is common in some Asian countries, but who the hell in America wants to sit in a bright white box with a bar in a very bad airport hotel when there are a load of hip bars a cab ride away? No one. And that's who was drinking in our bar. No one. I was used to working with people more or less my age and with the same point of view. Now, I was managing long-term union members who didn't care one bit. Add to that the complete lack of training I was given in how to work in a union environment, and it wasn't pretty. The HR manager, who recruited me, was leading negotiations with the union for the next contract and didn't want to upset the apple cart, so she refused to endorse any discipline. We had a busser, no call, no show for a month. We let him go as it was job abandonment. It was grieved, and he was brought back as a banquet porter. What the heck? It was a union house, yet when someone no-showed or called out, I was expected to cover. I didn't know this until a few weeks in when I got a call at 3 a.m. saying I had to cover the breakfast shift as both server and cashier. The controller was convinced everyone was stealing. She walked around all day looking for opportunities, any possibilities that someone might remove a paperclip and screw the hotel. The accountant sat in his office, chain-smoking cigarettes. He looked like something out of a movie with his long nails and an ash never less than 3 inches long. His office was always locked and he was barricaded in his desk by 2 shredders, and they were always going. The banquet manager got arrested for ADUI and convinced the guy who had my job before me to bail him out. No one knew this until one day he didn't show up and the cops came by looking for Buddy. Turns out the old manager had put his house on the line for this dude, so he was screwed. The chef was awful. Like out of a book awful. He would buy fish from his steward who was catching them in the bay. The bay was known to be full of PCBs and other contaminants from a few hundred years of pollution and was deemed off-limits for catching food. The Sunday buffet was everything from the last week or so covered in cream sauces and lemon slices. Didn't matter if it was bad or not, just add more lemon slices. Banquet food came out of the freezer and got put in the hot box hours before the event, yet this clown ran around yelling at everyone like he was Gordon Ramsay. The general manager was told his contract wouldn't be renewed a month into my tenure, so he said screw it and had me order cases of Dominus. And Lynch Bages, a 5th growth Bordeaux that drinks like a first. I learned that wine crap later, as I was 25 and considered Miller Genuine Draft Light and Rumplemints the pinnacle of fine drinking. He would get off work and sit in the bar knocking back $60 of wine, around $100 in today's Skrilla, while I was yelled at for letting him do it. Let him do it. That was my boss. How could I stop him? Needless to say, things weren't working out, so after a few months we agreed at my 90-day review to part ways. It was an easy decision. I was moving on and happy in my next gig, but still friends with some of the people I worked with who were there. In fact, I ended up in the wedding of one of them. I was already salty about my time there, as what I was promised and what happened were worlds apart. But then, my friend got screwed over. She had landed a long-term contract with the power company. We had some bad storms that damaged the power grid, and they brought people from another market in for 9 months to trim trees, modernize things, whatever it is power companies do in such cases. My friend should have received 1.5% of all their billing. Rooms, food, misexpenses, all should have had a slight vig that kicked to her as was laid out in her employment bonus program. This would have been huge money as it was dozens of rooms a night over 9 months. When bonus time rolled around, they kicked her a tiny fraction of what she was owed. Instead of close to six figures, she barely got a few grand. She was livid, as was her fiancé and I. One night, we were all complaining about it at the bar watching football. I really hated that place for me, for her, for everyone stuck in that hellhole. A terrible thought entered my brain around halftime and wouldn't go away. I wasn't sure what I was going to do, but this would be my night. I drove to the property and parked next door. It was not a well-lit area, so I could sneak over to where my old office was, and I jumped the wall. We always left the slider open to go out and smoke. It was a converted ground-floor room, and I knew the banquet manager who shared the office was still on the run, so I should be safe. Once in the office, I looked around trying to decide what to do when I saw the POS computer. This was the 90s. So everything was controlled by this dinosaur from the 80s in the back room that had a plastic box over the keyboard so no one could accidentally hit a key. I grabbed my shirt like I'd seen in the movies so I wouldn't leave any prints and fired it up. This old beast ran MS-DOS as its operating system, and I was enough of a geek to know what to try. I typed in CD to get to the root directory. Then, delete for the vast majority out there who have no idea what that means. I wiped out the root directory. I was giddy with that total awe heck. What did I just do feeling? Not sure if that was enough and completely surprised I was able to do so, I double downed and typed in format C. The thing basically blinked and just started chugging along. It freaking erased itself. I got the heck out of there and somehow made it home. I guessed they'd have to reboot from a backup, and that would be a pain in the heck. A year or so later, I ran into some of the hotel peeps in a bar, and they asked if I'd heard about what happened. It turned out that someone hacked the system and destroyed it. Because it was so old, experts had to be flown in, and they said the person must have been a masterful hacker because if they had done anything less, then it would have been an easy fix. Anything more, and it would have left electronic fingerprints. It turned out that there were no backups. It was towards the end of the month, and all the sales data was gone. The experts couldn't rebuild a system so old, so a new system had to be purchased and installed. That alone ran over six figures to do. This also triggered an audit. Remember the controller who was convinced everyone was stealing? Turns out she was. She and the accountant were led out of the hotel in handcuffs, as it turns out the feds don't like it when you embezzle from a company in their receivership. At that point, it hit me that I could be in some seriously hot water, so once my heart started pumping again, I stopped any sort of coy, "What do you mean nonsense?" when asked if I knew anything about it, and just shut up. The statute of limitations is long gone, and it's an obvious throwaway. I wish I could take credit for being such a master hacker, but it was just the actions of a very angry drunk man with a geeky background. This happened a little while ago, but it still gives me warmth and fuzzies when I think about it. About 2 or 3 years back, I got in touch with someone who wanted me to do some work for him. I'm a designer. I do contract work, but up until now, I'd never had a contract I asked people to sign. Mistake number 1. Anyway, I worked with this person over the course of 6 months or so. I initially quoted him an amount for what he asked for. He didn't want to pay that much, so we agreed on a smaller scope. Afterwards, he started asking for constant changes. I did that, tacking on time to the project as we went. Mistake number 2. The entire time the project is going on, he's telling me how much he loves my work. Everything looks great. It looks spectacular. Exactly what he wanted. End of the project rolls around, and I've made a small tweak to see what he thinks. It would make things easier to build, cheaper, etc. I sent him the bill for my work, which was for about $1,500. He freaks at me, telling me that I've been purposefully doing things wrong the entire time to pad the time required, seemingly forgetting the constant stream of praise he's been sending me. Tells me he refuses to pay and that I've been untrustworthy the entire time. Says that the last tweak I made was wholly unasked for and completely away from the project specs, again saying that I'd been doing this on purpose. Flabbergasted, I offered to change it back for free and apologize for the confusion. No response. I talk with a lawyer friend of mine, and he advises me to offer an olive branch if I want to take it to court. So I offer to cut the bill from $1,500-ish to about $500 and give him everything I'd made, so far as a peace offering. No response. After about 6 months, I go to small claims and file a report. I spent weeks agonizing over my case. I collected everything, discussions, images, etc., and laid it into a timeline. I go to the hearing and he doesn't show. The court says there needs to be another hearing to give him another chance. Another month goes by and he's a no-show. Now he's officially in contempt of court and I have won the case. But in order to get him into court, I need to get a constable to bring him in. That's like $400 and I don't have the money at the time. About 6 months pass, I get a new job and can afford the constable. I ring one up and give him the guy's address that was on his business card and what was registered for his company. The first week, they stake it out. Does he drive a BMW? I'm not sure. Turns out he does, but they weren't sure if the guy was there or not. 2 weeks pass and I get the phone call, we've got him. Come in. I show up to the court and text the constable. I spot them through the doors to another room and see the dude is sitting there. Nice. The constable comes out, tells me how things are going to go down. He takes me and the guy into a side room and basically explains how, since I won the judgment, he has to pay me. He gets the guy to write a check to me, hands it to the constable. Then he goes, on second thought, no, I don't want to pay him. I want to talk to the judge first. Constable says, okay. We go into the courtroom. First case up, we stand in front of the judge. The guy starts trying to say, I don't think he deserves the money. Didn't do the work. I don't want to pay him. Judge basically says, yeah, but you didn't show up to the case. You lost. Guy tries to argue with the judge and gets immediately shut down. Constable walks over to hand me the check. Case dismissed. On the way out, the constable jokes with the guy, well, I guess you can go back to your birthday now. Guy says, yeah, even have a cake and everything, trying to make light of it, but he's pissed. We left, not even looking at one another, though he held the door for me as I stepped out. So I have a friend who every time I meet him, he always finds his way to correct me about anything we are talking about. It can be grammar, political things, personal finance, or things I have done myself that are so tiny and unimportant, but he still sees them and tell me I should not have done that because whatever reason and so on. This is a very good friend, and I know he's not doing this in a bad way, but at the same time I feel that his corrections are getting more frequent and that he feels somehow superior to me. He's like he's entitled to do these corrections. This is not something he only does with me, but with others too. However, I have not noticed it that much. Most of the times I try to being receptive and listen to what he has to say so I can learn, but in the end he made me feel like a kid who needs to learn, and this makes me feel annoyed. How should I go about this situation with him?